You're watching This Week in Louisiana Politics with Fred Childers.
Good Sunday morning to you. I'm Fred Childers. Thanks for joining us for This Week in Louisiana Politics on your local election headquarters. Well, more people in Louisiana have health insurance these days. Compared to 2016, the number of uninsured has been reduced by half. Now, that's according to Governor John Bel Edwards, citing a Louisiana health insurance survey. Governor Edwards attributes the improvement to the expansion of Medicaid, which is a key component of Obamacare. The governor expanded Medicaid as soon as he took office back in 2016. Since that time, the uninsured rate in Louisiana has gone from 22.7% to 11.4%.
Since coverage began on July 1st, 2016, right at 473,000 working Louisianan adults have received health coverage through the expansion. Many for the first time ever, and they are receiving treatment from everything from breast cancer and colon cancer to mental health and substance abuse.
Edwards also touted economic advantages from expanding Medicaid in Louisiana to the tune of about $3.5 billion. U.S. Senator John Kennedy's criticism of prison reform in Louisiana is being challenged by the Pelican Institute. Governor John Bel Edwards, the subject of Senator Kennedy's reform critiques, provided a link to a Pelican Institute article in The Advocate that takes aim at Senator Kennedy's recent letter to President Donald Trump. It characterized the governor's prison reform as a prison release program that does not make Louisiana any safer. Now, he says many of the prisoners who were released early have been rearrested, and some for violent offenses. The article features a list of those claims along with a list of fact checks that challenge the assertions which Kennedy based his criticism on. Now, the Pelican Institute concludes that it's too early to draw any conclusions about the program, but so far it shows promise. They've been described as political slush funds, pots of money elected officials use for luxury hotels, five-star restaurants, and sporting events. Now, they're actually called Leadership Political Action Committees, or PACs, and critics want reforms to limit their spending. Washington correspondent Drew Petrimo is looking into how members of the Louisiana delegation use leadership PACs to dole out hundreds of thousands of dollars for an extravagant party in the nation's capital.
They say it's one of the best parties in town. Washington Mardi Gras brings the pageantry and revelry of Bourbon Street right here to the nation's capital. It's a three-day affair, complete with cocktail parties, a pageant, even an indoor parade. The Louisiana delegation is heavily involved, and they help foot the bill to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars. The money comes from lawmakers' Leadership Political Action Committees. First allowed 40 years ago, leadership PACs provided a way for elected officials to raise money and dole it out to other like-minded politicians and candidates. That was then. This is now.
The rules on the books say that leadership PAC money can be spent for almost anything.
Over the past 2 years, Senator Bill Cassidy spent a total of more than $100,000 on the yearly party, for catering and event space at the Washington Hilton, and for tickets from the Mystic Crew, which puts on the events. Over the same period, Representative Steve Scalise used his leadership PAC to spend nearly $40,000 at the Hilton and more than $53,000 on tickets. Congressman Ralph Abraham, Clay Higgins, Cedric Richmond, and Senator John Kennedy also used their leadership PAC money to support Washington Mardi Gras. All told, members of the Louisiana delegation spent more than $250,000 on the 2017 and 2018 events. It's held here at the Washington Hilton. It's one of the premier venue spaces in the city. Scores of Louisianans travel to D.C. for the celebration. There are meetings and mingling. Some lawmakers even host fundraisers. But critics say leadership PACs have strayed from their original intent.
Just one more thing that makes people feel that politicians are disconnected from their constituents.
Ellen Weintraub is vice chair of the Federal Elections Commission. She has spent years trying to rein in spending by leadership PACs.
I don't think their intent is to subsidize the lifestyle of the people who are receiving the money.
But that's exactly what Michael Beckel with Issue 1 says lawmakers across the country are doing.
They are collecting money from the special interest groups that have business before their committees and donors who have already maxed out to their campaigns.
Beckle's organization conducted a nationwide study that found lawmakers used that money to pay for things like luxury resorts, golf memberships, fine dining, and big parties.
If you've got additional pots of money that a special interest or wealthy donor knows that they can give to curry favor, that's one more potential avenue for corruption in the process.
Louisiana lawmakers say that's nonsense. They contend Washington Mardi Gras promotes the state. During the events, they meet with other officials and constituents, hearing the needs and concerns of people in Louisiana. But no one from the Louisiana delegation was willing to defend their support for Washington Mardi Gras on camera.
As long as you have transparency.
Former FEC Commissioner Hans von Spakovsky, now with the Conservative Heritage Foundation, defends leadership PACs. He says they are an expression of political free speech, and there's nothing secret about their spending.
I think all the critics of this show that they really don't trust the American people to make their own decisions on the candidates that they want to vote for.
Beckel and Weintraub say leadership PACs need more regulation, but Weintraub can't muster the votes on the FEC to limit their spending.
I could write a scathing statement about it, but I couldn't actually punish anybody.
Change would likely require new laws passed by the very people taking advantage of the status quo. Members of Congress. In Washington, I'm Drew Petrimo.
Coming up, what's the future of Louisiana's transportation projects? Well, you'll hear from the man in charge of 16,000 miles of Louisiana roads and highways next.
This is your local election headquarters.
Well, the condition of Louisiana's roads and bridges continues to be a hot topic for lawmakers and candidates running for office. A lot of improvements have been made, lots of funding secured, and yet there's a lot more work to do. Secretary of the Department of Transportation and Development, Shawn Wilson, spoke to the Baton Rouge Press Club about the road ahead.
That these are the 4 things I'm going to do my entire time as secretary, and should the public accept what they are and what this administration has done, we'll have an opportunity for phase 2 of these. Some of them may be the same, but I think it's important that you have some consistency in what you get out of public service. And so for me, those simple things are what I call my 4 PowerPoint. But we're going to just talk about it. And those 4 things are making a case for new revenue here in the state of Louisiana. As you know, it's been nearly 3 decades, if not longer, that we've had real infusions of dollars into our infrastructure. We talked about taking full advantage of our federal resources. And as you know, a part of your gas tax goes to the federal government, and it comes back to the state in a number of ways. One is a formula, the other is in discretionary areas. And so we wanted to take advantage of that because the federal government has moved to a much more discretionary environment than we've ever seen before. And then we talked about number 3, having a balanced transportation agenda, talking about all modes of transportation because we are all integrated. I can't deal with just highways, I can't deal with just rails, I can't deal with just runways, I can't ignore the waterways, I can't discount the freight environment and what all that means, and I can't discount Mutt and Jeff, as we used to say, the left and the right foot, and how pedestrians exist in our communities and how best to keep them safe in those efforts. And then last but certainly not least, over my years in government, I've learned the importance of being more collaborative with legislators, being more collaborative with stakeholder groups, but most importantly, being more collaborative with local governments. Because I own, as the State Department of Transportation, I own 16,000+ miles of road that exist in communities all across this state. First, when you talk about making the case for new revenue, I can tell you the one most important thing that we were able to do on day 1 is protect the Transportation Trust Fund as best we can and eliminate diversions as best we could in an environment, as you know, where we had significant budget deficits and challenges there. And so in order to make a case for revenue, you have to show responsibility. You have to show that you are making good and wise decisions. Outside of the natural disasters that we've seen in August and March of 2016, I have to think about the daily routine, hurricane evacuation, freezes, ice events, having closed every interstate here in the state of Louisiana because of weather since I've been secretary. Having to close the bridge in Grand Isle, Louisiana because of ice is different. And so from the state's perspective, we have to be responsible to the citizens for that, but we've also taken on some really aggressive efforts. So the second one was, how do we take advantage of federal funds? Well, I'm happy to tell you, I talked a little bit about the Fast Lane grant that we got in the first part of this administration. That was about $60 million. And then we followed up with another federal grant that was competitive. We got $45 million for our first public-private partnership. We were one of 23 states, and I think we have the highest percentage of what we asked for being awarded. We asked for $50 million, and we got 45. And when you talk about the third PowerPoint, which is having a balanced transportation system, I can tell you we've doubled the Port Priority Program in year 1 and year 2. And we've created an Office of Multimodal Commerce that is working with businesses and industries all across the state of Louisiana. We're also excited about having worked with our congressional delegation to fund projects like the Co-Meet Diversion Project, something that's been on the books for many, many years, but something that is now fully funded. We put together a plan that had a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C for funding, and we've got a hybrid of that, and at the end of the day, we expect to have that project started next year and then finished 4 years after that. And everything I've talked to you about have been really good success stories, but there's one that we weren't so successful with, and that's with the truck permit overhaul. We made a valiant effort to fix it the right way. We weren't successful, but folks are still having those conversations. When you think about a freight industry and a freight community like Louisiana, you have to think about those that are moving things through Louisiana and that are moving things to and from Louisiana and how they all fit together. We see all across the state, the 12,000 bridges I have, the Port of Baton Rouge can't be successful if I can't get timber out of a forest in North Louisiana to get to a barge, to get to a chipper, to get to the Port of Baton Rouge. And so if that bridge at the farthest extent of that relationship doesn't work, the trees are going to stay in the forest and not make it to the port to get overseas for energy. So let's talk a little bit about the future of transportation in Louisiana. I see Secretary LaBaugh is here, and we, over the years, saw our backlog decrease because of one-time investment. Well, as I stand here today, our backlog is creeping back up slowly but surely to what it was when I got there with the Blanco administration, up to $14 billion. And for the general public, that $14 billion are things that we have to do to maintain a state of good repair, things that are already built. That's not the new bridge. That's not the widened interstate. Those projects are on our wish list, and that's about $15 billion here in the state of Louisiana. So all told, you're looking at about $30 billion of things that we need in infrastructure. So where do we go in terms of connected vehicles? Where do we go in terms of mobility solutions? You won't go very far unless you have the base element of what you need, which is a local revenue stream. When you think about public-private partnerships, I cannot promise the world for tolling if I can't make up the other 60% of a new bridge in Baton Rouge. That is the scenario. I can't widen I-49 or build the intercity connector with a concept of a P-free, because that's not how it's going to happen. They're going to need to get a return on their investment, and I have to have the full funding before I obligate that. And so as we go into another legislative session, I can't promise you that there's going to be a solution, but I don't know that we have an alternative to investing in infrastructure that's going to be sustainable in the long term. And it brings me back to where we were in 2017. If you don't have the right number, if you don't spend it the right way, the public will continue to distrust how we will spend our dollars. And you can look no farther than having a legislative process to identify projects as opposed to identifying projects and spending money as they are prepared to be spent. And so I think the solution to the future of Louisiana's infrastructure is doing what we've already done. We've made good decisions. We've invested in projects that we've all agreed, for the most part, that we need. Maybe not the finer components of what it's going to look like through Baton Rouge, but we all agree that it needs to be widened. We all agree that there needs to be a new bridge. We all agree that protecting Barksdale is the way to go. We all agree that public-private partnerships are a tool. We've got all the tools. We've got all the projects. We've got all the expertise to make it happen. What we don't have is the fuel in our tank, i.e. the dollars, to deliver those things that the public is saying they want. And as Secretary, I will always be honest and frank with folks. I will always tell them what the realities are, and we will continue to close bridges if we have to make them safe. And we will continue to spend one-time money on the interstates to build them, because that's where the masses of people are going to be. And so as you travel from Lafayette down to Ascension, you see no less than 10 or 12 cranes on major widenings. It's all one-time money. It's all one-time money. It's not a sustainable revenue source. And so I don't believe that the future of transportation in Louisiana is going to be one-time money. I think it's got to be something sustainable. I think it's got to be meaningful, and it's got to follow national best practices in terms of how you allocate it.
All right, great information. We'll continue coverage of the state's roads and bridges with a closer look at the I-10 widening project after the break.
This is your local election headquarters.
Welcome back. Some home and business owners wonder what will happen to their property because of the I-10 Expansion project. Amber Smith puts that question to Secretary Wilson.
The Louisiana Department of Transportation and Development is expanding I-10 to ease traffic congestion in Baton Rouge.
We're excited to be at this point in this project. This is something that we've waited for a long time, as well as many of the 80,000+ or 90,000+ vehicles that travel through there in congestion on a regular basis.
But with news of the project comes one frequently asked question.
The biggest concern, I think, for folks is what's going to happen to my property.
Some home and business owners say they've lived along the interstate for years and don't want to move.
The good news, many of them won't have to. LADOTD Secretary Sean Wilson says about 90 to 95% of the land needed for the expansion is owned by the state.
There's a total, if I'm not mistaken, of about 90 parcels that will be impacted. The majority of those parcels are just land acquisitions, 5 feet, 10 feet here, 10 feet there. And then there's a small number, somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 structures that are going to be impacted that are either a business or a residence.
While every construction project comes with a few bumps in the road, Wilson says this has been a long time coming.
And this is a project that we've attempted for the last 20 years on 3 different occasions, and never before have we gotten this far, nor have we ever had the funding that's available, the $350 million, to actually begin construction once a decision is made. So we're excited about this opportunity to begin the transformation of what is the bloodline through Baton Rouge.
For your local election headquarters, I'm Amber Smith.
Well, the department will unveil the plans for the project, answer questions, and take input at a series of public meetings in the coming days. Now, for those dates and times, just visit this story on our website, brproud.com. The Louisiana Democratic Party announced endorsements for several candidates in the upcoming midterm elections. Take a look. In their latest meeting, Democratic leaders chose Renee Fontenot-Free to endorse for Secretary of State. Party leaders also chose Democrats Tammy Savoy, Congressman Cedric Richmond, Mimi Metlevin, Ryan Trundle, Jesse Fleenor, and Justin DeWitt for the 6 congressional seats that are up for re-election come November. Most of these races feature either Republican incumbents or Republican challengers in the primary. If a general election is needed, that will be held December 8th. President Trump's White House is under a seemingly constant attack by legal challenges. We'll have an update next on This Week in Louisiana Politics.
This is your local election headquarters.
Welcome back. The White House says President Trump has done nothing wrong. This as Washington comes to terms with the growing legal headaches for 2 of Trump's former aides. Abby Phillips reports.
The White House in all-out damage control mode after 2 of President Trump's former aides become felons. Press Secretary Sarah Sanders repeating the same message.
As the president said, we've stated many times, he did nothing wrong. He did nothing wrong. The president in this matter has done nothing wrong.
Trump's former fixer, Michael Cohen, pled guilty to campaign finance violations and tax fraud charges, adding he broke the law in coordination with and at the direction of Trump.
They didn't come out of the campaign, and that's big. But they weren't. It's not even a campaign violation.
President rushing to defend his former campaign manager, Paul Manafort, who was found guilty of 8 counts of financial crimes. Tweeting, "I feel very badly for Paul Manafort and his wonderful family." Trump praising Manafort for refusing to break, prompting speculation he might consider a pardon. A possibility Trump's attorney Rudy Giuliani addressed last month.
If, in fact, the president and his advisors, not me, come to the conclusion that you've been treated unfairly. These pardons happen in these political investigations.
Michael, what's your message? The president also claiming today that Cohen's campaign finance violations are, quote, not a crime, and falsely claiming that President Obama's campaign had similar issues.
Violation. If you look at President Obama, he had a massive campaign violation, but he had a different attorney general. and they viewed it a lot differently.
Obama's campaign paid a $375,000 fine from the Federal Election Commission for reporting errors, but never faced accusations that aides intentionally sought to conceal campaign contributions that violated the law. Cohen reaching a deal with prosecutors on charges related to his hush money payments to 2 women who claimed to have had affairs with Trump.
And that's what Donald Trump is. He's an unindicted co-conspirator. Make no mistake about it, based on this plea agreement.
The court documents explicit references to Trump blindsided the president, White House sources told CNN. As Trump's legal risk magnifies, the president plans to aggressively try to discredit his former aide as a liar who should not be believed as a witness, according to sources. Republicans on Capitol Hill also ducking the issue, with just 2 months until the midterm elections.
All we know about it is that he's pled guilty, and everything else that you're asking me is speculation.
I don't think we know all the facts, so you're not concerned. No, that's not what I...
Okay, so both Democrats and Republicans in the Senate are reacting to the news about 2 former aides, those 2 former aides to President Trump. Trump's former personal lawyer, again, Michael Cohen, took a plea deal for campaign finance and other violations. But while Democrats are slamming the president for his alleged connection to Cohen's campaign finance felonies, Republicans are attacking Cohen's credibility.
I'm sorry, I don't see any deeper meaning in this other than you have to pay your taxes, and you can't lie on a loan application. I don't know how else to put it. I don't think the president knew that anybody had cheated on their taxes or incorrectly or intentionally or otherwise filled out a loan application. I mean, I don't see any evidence that the president knew they'd committed these crimes.
And get this, Michael Cohen's attorney said on Wednesday that he not only doesn't hope for a presidential pardon, he would not accept one. I'm not sure one would be offered at this point, but who knows. Thank you for joining us for This Week in Louisiana Politics. I'm Fred Childers. I'll see you next Sunday right here on your local election headquarters.